is lunch break, and at a relatively new camp for the Burundian AMISOM troops in Gashandiga, south of Mogadishu city, a Catholic worship hymn echoed through the whole of former Defense Ministry building. A few soldiers find time to come here to take minutes off their frontline duties to rehearse for the Sunday liturgy. The reverberating sound of the hymn is a refreshing moment that probably heralds new hope and courage for the soldiers to carry on the fight. 2 months ago, the Burundi contingent and the Somalia Transitional Federal Government forces embarked on one of the most risky offensives to capture the former Defense Ministry building from the Al-Shabaab.
Close to the run if you have to.
The Al-Shabaab lost this important ground after an intensive battle that left many of them and a number of Burundi soldiers dead. The former Defense Ministry premises had become the nucleus from which the Al-Shabaab turned the Gashandiga area in Denli into their stronghold. The place had become one of the major tactical and logistical bases for the militants. The Al-Shabaab headquarters are in Kismayo in southern Somalia. Several desperate attempts by the Islamist militia to regain control of the building have met strong resistance from AMISOM and local TFG troops. Intelligence reports show the Al-Shabaab are trying to rebuild strength in parts of Hodan district and Hawal-Wadag.
On the other side in Hodan district, they are especially in Bakara market, which is in Hawal-Wadag district, and from that market, which is the biggest commercial hub in Mogadishu.
We can promise say it can take us 2 days.
2 days?
2 days enough to take us to Bakara.
The Al-Shabaab will live to remember the months of February and March. The group lost another raised expanse called the African Village. AMISOM is now using parts of this area and others to create a front that it will use to close in on the popular Bakara market and capture it from insurgents.
250. Yeah, you see after the log. Yeah? You see where there is a shadow? Yeah, a small shadow. That is another place where they are crossing from.
Bakara market has tall structures like the Horomud Telecom towers, which the Al-Shabaab can easily turn into a sniper's position.
And from those buildings, they are shooting on our positions. And we have made it clear that if they don't leave Bakara market as soon as possible, we will be obliged to force them out of the Bakara market.
And atop one of the buildings in African Village. The Al-Shabaab are about 50 meters away from here, and Burundi contingent thinks in a few days they'll be able to take over a structure the Al-Shabaab is consolidating. The structures used by the radical Islamists to launch offensives range from raised buildings, fortification trenches and makeshift shelters. AMISOM commanders say Al-Shabaab copied some of these tactics of urban warfare, like digging fortification trenches and using tall buildings that provide good positions for sniping from the Chechens. So, the commanders take time to plan and gather as much intelligence information as possible. And many times, Al-Shabaab have made mistakes that cost them chunks of their territory in Mogadishu. A few months ago, for instance, Al-Shabaab thought that AMISOM would use tanks to maneuver through streets and the rough urban terrain in contested districts. They dug anti-tank ditches on the roads and blocked other roads with sand-filled containers. But it appears the strategy is not working.
When that fails, they deploy their last options, and that is suicide bombing, either by putting IEDs along the roadside, or
IEDs?
These are improvised explosive devices, or they can pack explosives in a vehicle and send it into and come and throw it into your defense.
Here, AMISOM soldiers are scaling house to house, digging through walls and squeezing within fortification trenches to counter the enemy.
It was big. I could go inside. You could not see me. I'll even try to stretch my hands like this. I could not touch the 2 walls.
Lieutenant Colonel Mbusi, who has fought in the famous Kilometer 4 junction, Terabunka, Bondere and other parts, is fully aware that the Al-Shabaab have dug through roads like 15th May up to the 21st October road. So, such roads cannot be used by any armored vehicle. Soldiers have to launch offensives from a distance until the insurgents flee, and also clear the surrounding areas of their remnants. As Lieutenant Colonel Mbusi consolidates parts of Wanaha Road, which his troops captured a few weeks ago, he's planning how his men will cross over to open Industrial Street towards the east of Mogadishu in order to allow residents to move freely.
This is 26 June. They all link up to this great industrial road or 21st October road. So,
in the north of his position, Lieutenant Colonel John Mugaru and his men have just taken over the Bakara Junction, Hawal Wadag Junction and the Aden Aden Junction, as well as the Red Mosque. These junctions on the southern and western edges of Bakara Market, the largest local business area in Mogadishu, are overlooked by the Red Mosque Tower. For a long time, the Al-Shabaab controlled the famous Red Mosque. They used it as a court to administer Sharia law. The Al-Sunnah wa Jama Muslims who support the TFG and AMISOM are celebrating the return of this mosque even when much of its past glory and architectural designs have wasted away, including the tomb of renowned Islamic teacher Sheikh Biamaro. The Al-Shabaab still look up to foreign fighters for mentoring and logistic support. More than 4 months ago, at the Mogadishu seaport, TFG security operators and AMISOM impounded a consignment of trucks which are about to be delivered to the Al-Shabaab. The origin of the trucks remains a mystery to date. AMISOM feels it is extremely important that it closes channels used by the insurgents for supply and resupply. But this could take a long time since it requires the international community to agree on many things.
AMISOM does not have the capacity to interdict supplies that are headed for Al-Shabaab. Because there are some of these ports that are not under our control, like Marka, like Irman port. So these are ports that they use.
AMISOM now controls between 67% and 70% of Mogadishu. Consolidating this area requires a strong troop presence. The mission heads and commanders recommend that 20,000 troops could do a remarkable job. Sierra Leone could be the next country to deploy troops, but other African Union countries remain reluctant.
They have also, in fact, been here recently, and their plans to deploy have been finalized. They could be deploying anytime from now.
The TFG troops are steadily turning professional, although a lot more still needs to be done. It is not lost on the AMISOM and TFG commanders that there could be subterranean elements in the TFG army, whose mission is not to work for peace, but to ultimately help the enemy. AMISOM has to watch the rear for infiltration as it advances to capture more ground from the Al-Shabaab. Latest reports indicate that more than 100 Al-Shabaab defectors have relocated to one of the internally displaced people's camps in Mogadishu. Mission heads charged with human welfare are thinking of the quickest way to resettle former insurgents. Infighting within the Al-Shabaab could be the major cause of many of their troubles, especially the big losses of men and territory in Mogadishu. The killing of Muhammad Fazul in June is partly attributed to this infighting. It is said Fazul could have been deliberately misled so that he drove into a TFG checkpoint at Afegoye on the outskirts of Mogadishu. This is the ex-control Afegoye junction where Fazul Mohammed was killed. It is on kilometer 7 on the road or the highway that leads to Ethiopia. Fazul was the Al-Qaeda leader in East Africa. It is hard for the AMISOM combat and peace-building mission to succeed when Somalia's internal politics is fractious. In part 2 of this series tomorrow, we speak to Somali President Sheikh Sharif Ahmed on his plans for peace and laying a harmonious political ground in the long-suffering war-battered country. Frank Walisimbi, NTV.